Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about the movie Us, and specifically why Jordan Peele chose to tell a story about a wealthy family, the Wilsons, right? So I think this is an important question, and the reason why is because this choice is being questioned by some reviewers and critics, specifically K. Austin Collins of Vanity Fair. So K. Austin Collins did a review of the film, actually talked about the film in depth on Slate podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts. Highly recommend it. I recommend listening to K. Austin Collins' discussion with Dana Stevens about the movie Us. Right, but in that movie, there was kind of a throwaway line that he said, but I thought he was incredibly wrong, and I thought it was a deep question. He said it almost like a throwaway line. He's like, "Oh, why do we have to watch another movie about wealthy people?" Right? And I've heard this a lot lately, right? People are like, "Oh, why is every period piece about rich people? Why don't we have stories about poor people?" Right? And when I didn't think too much of it because, because I'm like, oh, this is a lesser critic, just asking this question. Now, I don't think K. Austin Collins is necessarily a lesser critic. I think he got his review of Us shockingly wrong. And this is one of the areas where he was dead wrong, right? So he was saying this kind of like, oh, it's trite to tell a story about wealthy people. Well, today I'm going to tell you why I think Jordan Peele chose to make the Wilsons wealthy in this movie, and because I think it's really important, and why the vast majority of directors choose to make stories about wealthy people, and why I think it's not a bad decision, right? So I'm going to use a mnemonic to remember my 2 points, which is choice surrender. So that's just a mnemonic for me, just to remember my choices. All right, now I do want to make one caveat before we go forward. So if a director or if a writer or a director wants to make a story about poor people, they can absolutely do that, right? I'm not saying that no one has a right to do that. I'm explaining why directors and writers choose not to do that, right? And specifically why Jordan Peele chose not to, in my opinion, right? But the other thing is, generally, when you go about that, your project is going to be a slog, and it's going to have a very limited audience because people aren't going to watch it, right? And by the time we get done talking about why Jordan Peele chose to make the Wilsons wealthy, you're going to know why at the end. Okay, all right. Why you would have such a limited audience for these, for anything that is really about poor people distinctly, and poor people are the protagonist, is going to have this problem. So let's go forward. Okay, so the biggest, one, K. Austin Collins, I think he was so wrong about this movie, Us. So one of the things is I think in his mind, he might have had the idea that Jordan Peele would be more likely to tell a story about poor people than someone else. I have no idea where this would come from. It seems ridiculous because, one, if you look at Jordan Peele, Jordan Peele is now a growing director, right? And it's very clear. I haven't looked this up, right? I'm betting 1,000,000 to 1. Jordan Peele has at least 1 or 2 degrees, right? He is clearly educated. You can tell that because he's a writer, and he's a director, and he's a producer, right? You don't get those jobs from not reading a lot of books. It just doesn't happen, right? So he is clearly educated. You can tell it by his vocabulary. You can tell it by humor. Humor is self-selecting for highly intelligent people, right? And so so basically, I think Jordan Peele came from an educated background from the gate, was educated from the gate. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll bet you if you look it up, there's absolutely no way he doesn't have a few degrees under his belt, right? All right, so, and then the second one is, he did Key and Peele, right? He came out of 5 or 6 seasons of an incredibly successful story, of an incredible successful show with Comedy Central. He's got cheddar, man. That guy is making bank. No two ways about it. He is wealthy himself, right? So why a wealthy person would say, oh, I really want to focus on poor people, it can happen, but it's unlikely, all right? So one, I think the idea that Jordan Peele would be more likely to tell a story about poor people than wealthy people, I don't know where that's coming from. I have no idea why K. Austin Collins would think that, right? Second point, let's get into choice surrender. This is the reason why I think Jordan Peele is an incredibly intelligent writer, an incredibly intelligent director, an incredibly intelligent producer, right? So he wants to make something that makes sense. He wants to make a movie that people enjoy watching. And he wants, as a producer, he wants that thing to go out there and perform. How does a movie perform, right? One, it makes more money than it cost to make, right? And the media is talking about it and people are talking about it, right? So he wants to make a movie that people want to see, right? So you're going to understand two things about humanity, and that is choice, surrender. Let's get into choice. The reason directors make a ton of movies about wealthy people and almost no movies about poor people is every single thing a wealthy person does is wrapped in choice, right? So when you get a gift, right, what would you like when you receive a gift, right? If somebody's giving you a story, right, you want there to be wrapping on that gift, right? Because wrapping is cool. You know, it might be shiny blue wrapping. It could be, dark opaque wrapping. It could be a nice Merlot, right? It could be Zima blue, right? It could be a million different colors, right? There could be patterns on the wrapping, right? And that's what choice is. When a wealthy person does anything, they have choices, many choices, right? And that is fascinating and interesting on every single thing they do, right? I'll give you an example. Poor girl, rich girl, okay? Poor girl goes into a park just for a short period of time, sits on a bench, and has a conversation with a young man, right? They have a wonderful conversation. In fact, it's the best conversation the girl's ever had. And the boy smiles at the girl at the end of the conversation, right? The young man smiles at the girl at the end of the conversation, right? And then he just leaves, right? But when he leaves, a card falls out of his bag, and that card has the hotel name, has a hotel name for a hotel in Japan, right? Girl goes back to her life, but the next day she can't stop thinking about the young man. She really wants to see him, okay? Poor girl, all right? Let's do the same story with rich girl, okay? Rich girl goes into the park, has a conversation with the young man. It's the best conversation she ever had, right? Young man gives her a smile before he leaves, right? And then he leaves the park and he drops the card with the name of a hotel in Japan, right? Now, poor girl, where does the story go from here, right? Poor girl, well, I got no money, so I'm never going to see him again, right? Or maybe I start doing a Google search, right? Or, rich girl, I'm on a plane to Japan now. I am leaving everything behind to go see this young man. Which story do you want to see? Do you want to see somebody do a Google search? Or do you want to see somebody hopping on a plane, right? And that is just one super simple story. Every single thing, what they wear, the people they hang around with, what they choose to drive, what they eat, everything, every single thing about the wealthy is wrapped in choice, right? And that means that that essentially those stories are vibrant and colorful and interesting, right? Whereas stories about poor people are not interesting, right? Now, by the way, I've been both. I've been poor. Should I say I've been poor? Yeah. When me and my wife, yes, I can say I was poor. I have bought cars for $350 and then, paid $800 to get it repaired 2 weeks later, and then it broke down 2 weeks after that. We've been poor, right? So, and actually at this point, I have a measure of wealth, right? I'm not sure. I think I spike into wealth every now and then. I am doing well, but wealthy is a big word. So, so that's the thing, is choice is a big, big issue, right? And so Jordan Peele understands this, right? People don't want to watch stories about people who have no choices. They are willing to watch those stories, and we should all be willing to watch stories about poor people. How often should we be able to do that? As much as 10% of what we watch should be about poor people. Why do I use that 10% idea? Well, it's based on tithing, right? I'm an evangelical Christian. Whenever there's something I should be doing that I don't want to do, maybe 10% of your activity should go to that. It's a good metric, right? All right. So basically, and that's important. We should be willing to watch stories about poor people, but nobody wants to, right? Because you're watching stories about somebody who doesn't have a choice, right? What's the next reason why directors, writers, creatives, artists, why do they tell stories about wealthy people, right? Well, it's this idea of surrender, right? Never give up, never surrender. Great line from Galaxy Quest, right? And I live by this, man. I do not quit, right? You're going to have to beat me, right? Like, and so that is, it's a big chess thing, right? Like a lot of people, they lose their queen and they're 12 points down and they resign. No, man, I am going to the last pawn, right? You've got to beat me. I'm not going to surrender. And I think most Americans, especially Americans, they will not give up, right? So even if they're poor, they want to watch stories about wealthy people because in their mind, they're saying, one day I will be wealthy. It will be from my hard work. It will be from my Powerball ticket. Or even if I don't make it, my child will be wealthy, right? Or even if I don't have a child and I am not wealthy, one of my friends will become wealthy and they'll bring me along with me, right? There's always hope. And as Americans, if we are poor, and I certainly did this, I would say to Leanne, we're poor now, but we ain't always going to be poor, right? And so that, that's a big deal, right? Like, so the idea is if you feel like, oh, I'm going to watch this story about a poor person, I think Americans in their minds and in their hearts are like, I ain't watching that because I'm only temporarily poor, right? And I think that's a great spirit to have. That's a great spirit to say, I'm always, a few hard years work away from being rich, right? Like my next generation is going to be the rich ones. We should always have this hope. And we never, ever, ever surrender that hope. So when you're like, oh yeah, I want to see a bunch of stories about poor people, you're kind of like giving up. You're saying, I want to see stories about where I will always be. Right? I think that's why Americans just won't watch stories about poor people, right? Now, Jordan Peele got this. He understood choice surrender, right? He understood people want stories about choice, and he understood people never, ever surrender that idea that they will be wealthy, right? And so that's why Jordan Peele made the Wilsons wealthy in this movie. Now, I think I can hear it now. In fact, I was astounded, right? K. Austin Collins actually tried to float this idea that Jordan Peele was not telling a story for and about wealthy people, which is absolutely absurd. The Wilsons are absolutely wealthy in that movie. So Adie and Gabe and Zora and Jason, they are a wealthy family. And the reason why is I've got some cheddar. I got a little bit of money, right? We are not sweating a whole lot of stuff, right? We have everything we need, and we have quite a bit of what we want, right? But even with that, I don't have what the Wilsons had. The Wilsons are truly wealthy, right? They have a summer home, right? They have a boat, right? I don't have a boat, right? Like, I would love to own a boat, but I don't have that kind of money, right? That's like, I don't have boat money. Good Lord, right? And so they are incredibly wealthy. Also, if you noticed, right, Gabe is wearing a shirt that says Howard, which says incredibly prestigious higher education, right? The Wilsons are baller out wealthy, right? They are wealthy, right? Without a doubt, right? So if there's any question, that Jordan Peele is telling a story about wealthy people, that can be put to rest. He absolutely is. So I really love the movie Us. If you haven't seen it, go out and see it. Hey, I got through this without giving any spoilers. Yay! I thought I could do it. I didn't want to say spoiler warning at the beginning because sometimes I do give spoilers. So, but we got through and there were no spoilers in here. If you haven't seen Us, go see Us. If you've seen Us, go see it again, man. I'm so proud of Jordan Peele and just wonderfully happy for him that Us is being embraced, that he has set some records. He set some movie records with how well the movie has performed, I think, for the specific period of time for horror movies overall. He is really, really doing well, and he is coming to a point where maybe he could demand some of the movies that he would like to see. There is talk that he would like to be the director on a live-action Gargoyles. Man, I am so down for that trilogy, that series of movies. I would, Goliath, Bronx, all that. I'm just so happy to see that. So definitely check out Us if you haven't seen it. That's the reason Jordan Peele is telling the story of wealthy people and not poor people. That's my opinion on why he is telling stories about wealthy people and not poor people. This is a delicate subject, right? Am I wrong on this? Am I not understanding, why people don't like to watch movies about poor people? If I am, correct me. I always want my intellect, my will, and my emotions to be aligned with what is true and what is right. Let me know if I got this wrong, right? But if you think I'm right, please let me know your thoughts down below. And please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.